Ramchal was a very unusual person. He was called a Chacham HaKoilel. He's named in one of his Sfarim. It was very unusual because he wrote on many areas of Torah, many exoyas of Torah. He was a master of Kabbalah, one of the greatest Mekubalim of the last 500 years. He wrote the Mesilas Yesharim, which is considered one of the greatest Mesilas Yesharim ever written. It's in every yeshiva. All Gedolim have all yeshivas. Everybody has either learned it or whatever. Classes of learning it. But besides that, it was also very unusual because he was very much into thinking. He wrote a sefer on logic, on how to learn Torah. He wrote poetry. He wrote plays, Api Kabbalah. He wrote a second Zohar, a Zohar Tinyona, which is incredible. He wrote Tehillim. He wrote 150 Tehillim, like David HaMelech. He wrote many, many things. He was what's called a prolific author. He wrote also Hashkafas Sfarim, the Derech Hashem and Das Funis, which are considered gems of the whole concept of Hashkafa. So, I'm here, and actually all of you, are here to commemorate his memory. Before I begin, however, I just thought that I want to thank the people who sponsored this. Yisrael Zuckerman, Yitzchak Klinger, and Shlomo Tress. I want to thank you very much. And this, what was that? And David Hillmeyer. The schus of the Shir and the schus of Ramchal should be making you and should give you tremendous hatzlach in all your endeavors. So therefore we're here to commemorate Rabbi Chaim Yitzhak by giving a shir based on his material, his ideas. And the topic that I've chosen today, very interesting topic. It's a topic that everybody should know about, but really they don't know about it. Not the way it should be known. Why is limud Torah so great? That is the question. What exactly does the chashivas of Torah have that makes it so awesome? I mean, you think about it, the whole shtat Lakewood stands on Torah. Clearly then, Torah is the most chashiv thing of all, but why? That is the question I'd like to address tonight. Ramchal talks about it in several of his forums, but I'd like to go into it, elaborate on it, explain it, and try to bring it down, whatever, so a person can really understand when he learns the Torah, what exactly is he doing? In order to understand the concept of what Torah is, you need a certain introduction. Introduction is as follows. We know that the Hashem created the Bria, the world, with Asura Mamoros. We know that it's a Mishnah Pirkei Avos that he created the Bria with Asura Mamoros, 10 sayings, statements, declarations. What that really means is that the Hashem created the Bria employing specific forces. They're called spheres. Api Kabbalah, they're called spheres. They are incredibly lofty. Nobody really knows what they are because they're not even ruchnius. They're so high. Because ruchnius itself is a madrega, nemoicha from them. But whatever they are called spheres. Now, what concerns us is that these forces, and there are 10 in number, they create reality, which is amazing. They actually create things. The koach, of course, is from the Rebbeinu Shalom, but they actually are what's called the instrument to create the bria, which is reality. That's what they do. So we're looking at forces, spheres, that have awesome powers. The first reality that they create is Olam Haba. That's right. Olam Haba is the first thing that is created, not the last. It is the first thing that is created. And Olam Haba, of course, is something that we at present time have no asog about. It is a reality that we cannot be masik, really. It is something that is beyond our comprehension. But this is the first bria that it's the first olam that they create. And olam is a dimension of reality, a specific dimension of reality. And the first thing they create is olam haba. What happens after that is that all of the spheres diminish. Not really, but klapi the bria, it looks like they diminished. Therefore, their force, their power, their ore diminishes, gets less. And as a result of that, they create other realities, and they are 5 in number. And because their ore diminishes, the realities itself diminish, which is a very important concept. Until you get to what's called this world, which is the Olam HaGeshem. This is the world of materialism, the physical universe. And they diminish to such an extent where this world is now created. And there are 5 dimensions. What is the difference between all the olamas? The answer is basically one variable. How much hasaga, or how much presence of the yichud in the Rebbeinu Shalom can be perceived in that dimension. That's really the difference. It's called the ha'ora of the Rebbeinu Shalom. The greater the ha'ora, the greater the reality. The less the ha'ora, the more inferior is the reality. Therefore, what the spheres do is they create 5 realities, each one differing in the amount of ha'ora that they have in it, which means the amount of presence of the Rebbeinu Shalom that they have. And this basically is a central idea of each of the olamas. There are obviously more things, but basically they all differ around what's called this parameter. The concept of how much ha'ora, how much gilui of the Shechina or the Rebbeinu Shalom's presence is nizgala, can be revealed, or can be musib. If we know that, then we now understand something very important. What exactly is the purpose of a Jew? What is he supposed to do? Well, most people would answer the question that the purpose of a Jew, of a Yid, is to do what? It's to do mitzvahs. That is correct, but it's really only partially correct. The purpose of a Yid isn't only to do mitzvahs. What it is to change the reality of Olam HaGeshem, this universe, back into Olam Haba. Therefore, we need to retransform or reverse the process of its creation itself. This is what the Rebbeinu Shalom wants. He wants to restore what the Bria was originally. That's called zikuch. The Ramchal refers to this process as zikuch. Zikuch means retransformation, or more accurately, purification. Because what the Rebbeinu Shalom wants is he wants the Bria, which is physical, to dematerialize, so to speak, and become spiritual. And not only spiritual, but to ascend all the olamas. In other words, just like it went down 5 levels, we go up 5 levels until we get Olam Haba. At that level, the world is of such a nature that we cannot even comprehend. This is the tachlis of a Jew. That's really what goes on. Mitzvahs, as we will see, is the emtsui. It is the instrument that does it. But if you want to ask, well, what's the purpose of the Bria? The answer is to retransform. It's zikuch. That's what the idea really is. Of course, what the Moshe wants is that we need to do the zikuch. Of course, he could have done it. In the first place, he didn't even have to make anything below Olam Haba. But he wants us to have the schus, and in that we achieve perfection, or the purpose of the Bria. He wants us to be able to do it, not him. Therefore, he has given us bechira, or free will, where we choose what we want to do. And we're hoping that the choice that we do is, of course, zikuch. And we use what's called the instrument to do it. How do we know this? There's a Sefer Rabbi here, which was written a long time ago, probably Rabbi, one of the great Tanoim, that says, if you want to say Olam Haba correctly, grammatically, how would you say it? Would you say Olam Haba? No, not at all. Because Olam Haba simply means the world to come, not really. If you wanted to say the world to come, you would say Olam Sheyavoy, the world to come, or the future world. So the Bahir says, the Sefer Bahir says, that Olam Haba means the world that came, not the world to come. In other words, what we want to do is restore this world into a previous existence called Olam Haba. So therefore it's called Olam Haba, the world that came, we want it to be again. So it's really like going back into the future, so to speak. This is what the Sefer Bahir says, because it wants to show that Olam Haba was first and not last. So therefore, what we realize is Olam Haba is not a place. Where is Olam Haba? The answer is here. That's right. Lakewood, maybe. But it's here. It's a physical universe we transformed, called Zikuch, into a spiritual domain. That's really what it is. So Olam Haba is not a place. It's a state. It is a state of being. Now, we have no idea how that happens, but fundamentally, Olam Haba is here. You don't have to travel anywhere. What you have to do is change Olam Hazeh into Olam Haba. What's interesting about this is if you ask them, what is the essential tachlis, or what's the essential function of a Jew? And the answer, we are repairmen. You know, if your car's broke, what do? You go to a mechanic and he fixes your car. If your water is broke, your plumbing, you call a plumber, and so on. What do Jews fix? Jews fix existence. That's what we do. That's the greatest repair job of all time. And that's the concept of Zikuch. We repair a mokum, a place that is severely inferior. We repair it and we change it into a place that is beyond comprehension, and that is the concept of Olam Haba. So, just hang out a shingle, I'm a repairman. And I repair existence, which is the greatest repair of all. In any case, this concept where we repair has a name for it. It's called tikkun, which means repair, rectification, correcting, and so on. We do the tikkun. In other words, we change. All cell phones, please, off. We repair the bria. That's called tikkun. Tikkun simply means correction, or repair, or restoration. That's what we do. So the process of changing the bria, which is the physical universe, back into an Olam Haba is called tikkun. And that is what we want to do. Why do we want to do that? Because we don't want to live in a world that the presence of the Bar Shem cannot be perceived. Perhaps it can be felt, but not even now. It basically, hopefully, can be deduced, but it cannot be experienced, really. Not now, anyway. Except maybe if you go to certain places, like the Koisel and so on, then you feel something like etvas, something of the Shekhinah. But fundamentally, we want an existential dimension in which we can perceive and experience the Rabbi Hashem himself. And that place is called Olam Haba. You may be wondering, what about Yemais HaMashiach? And the answer is that Yemais HaMashiach is infinitely inferior to Olam Haba. Yemais HaMashiach is fundamentally the last dekuf of Olam Hazeh, but it has no shaykhs to Olam Haba. In any case, this is what we want to do. The question then, of course, is, okay, how do we do it? We understand what our task is. The task that we want to do is to reverse the process. And the answer is, well, what brought us to Olam Hazeh? And the answer is that these forces, the 10 forces called the spheres, they diminish their ha'ara, their ore, their force. What we need to do is get them to open up again and bring down the ore. That's what Klal Yisrael does. Klal Yisrael is always in a situation where they want to bring down the ore itself, thereby changing reality to a different reality. That's the magic. That's how it works. You bring down the ore of the spheres, and slowly, steadily, and you actually change reality from an inferior state, which is called Olam Hazeh, or Olam HaGeshem, and you reverse the process until you get to Olam Haba, the future world. And in that world is the greatest Gilui of the Rosham that is so great we cannot even masig it. In any case, that's what we do. We need to bring down ore. How do we do it? And the answer is fundamentally mitzvahs. A mitzvah is called a tikkun device. It is a device, and a tarya, that will enable the spheres to bring down their ore. Not going into how, but that's what they do. Therefore, a mitzvah is a tikkun device. That is what does the tikkun. Every time a yid does a mitzvah, he brings down a certain amount of ore. Even though we don't experience it now without going into it because of the chet of Adam Rishon, it is stored in your bank account. That's right. Everybody, all Klal Yisrael has bank accounts, each one. And what happens is when you do a mitzvah, that ore that you bring down is stored there. It doesn't affect the Bria yet because of the chet of Adam Rishon. But what happens in his, when Mashiach comes, and afterwards, that's really when it happens, in the 7,000th year, when 6,000 years will have been over, which is the English year 2240, that ore of each person's bank account will be released. And automatically, the world will be retransformed in front of your eyes, more and more. And of course, it's probably one of the most astonishing events you can ever witness. The actual retransformation of Geshem to Ruchni, higher until you get to Olam Haba. But that's a process that takes a while. In any case, this is what we want. We do mitzvahs. There are two other processes, without going into it, that also do the tikkun. The second process that can do the tikkun, because the Ramchal knew that Jews will not do all the mitzvahs, so he gave them a second way, which is inferior, and that is called tshuva. That's right. Tshuva is not just like a mitzvah. It is a mitzvah that can undo chatoim, which is where you didn't do the mitzvah. So tshuva is a second aspect of the process. It is a second tikkun device. If a person doesn't do tshuva, then he can engage in a third tikkun device, which is called yisurim. The secret of suffering is not punishment. It's what's called rehabilitation to a certain extent. It is a third device that can do the tikkun itself. Not going into why and how. But in any case, there are three devices that can do the tikkun. Mitzvahs, tshuva and yisurim, mosai. Mitzvahs, tshuva and yisurim. Those are the devices. Okay, now that we know that, now what? Oh, but there's a certain mitzvah that is beyond all the mitzvahs. We have Taryag mitzvahs, but there is one mitzvah that is not the same as the other Tofresh Yud Beis Taryav. It is called the Torah itself. That is not just quantitatively different, it is qualitatively different. What does that mean? And why is it so great? Let's take a look at what Torah is. Torah has several facets to it. One idea of Torah is the Chokhmah of Torah. It's a wisdom, it's a doctrine, it's a discipline, it's a Chokhmah. As such, Torah has basically 6 or 7 areas, topics, that the Torah deals with. One, well, the Torah deals with world history, right? It talks about other nations. Ammon, Moav, and the 70 nations, the Shemumas, and so on. So we get a feel of ancient history. The second thing Torah deals with is Jewish history, obviously. It goes from the beginning of the Bria, all the way, if you look at Tanakh, all the way down to Yirmiyahu and so on. The end, Chagi, Zechariah, and so on. Malachi and Zechariah and so on. It deals all the way with Jewish history, so it's a view also of Jewish history. But the third idea, which obviously becomes more important, is the concept of Taryag. The Torah has the Taryag Sivuyim, the 613 Sivuyim, mitzvahs, commandments, that the Moshe wants us to observe. Fourth area is called the Tikkun Hamidus. That the Rebbeinu Shalom wants us to act in a certain way in terms of character traits. That's what a midah is. And he wants us to act in a correct manner, which he prescribes in the Torah. That's called Tikkun Hamidus. Fifth way is Hanhogas. For instance, Avraham Avinu was incredible in Chesed. So Chesed was his midah, but his Hanhoga was Achnasas Orchim. You see. So the Torah has in it all the correct ways of behaving. Not only the correct character traits, but also the correct ways of behaving. But the Torah has more than that in terms of its areas. Another area is the concept of the tikkun progression. Yes, everything you read in the Torah, specifically the events of the Torah, moves the Bria toward a specific tikkun purpose. That's what it does. And the Torah is megala that, but that's really beginning to go into the concept of the Pnimis HaTorah, the Soid of the Torah. Who was Adam? Who was Avram? And so on. Who was Yaakov and Esau? Yitzchak. Who was Moshe? Why was he Yetzias Mitzrayim? All of these have only one purpose in mind. It is all part of the divine agenda, so to speak, to do the tikkun. And what the Rebbeinu Shalom does is he sets up the circumstances of mankind that they have a test. Hopefully they will pass, and therefore they will accomplish a certain tikkun as a result of that. That's called the tikkun progression. History is nothing more than the progression of tikkun as it advances. That's basically what it is. And the soid of everything is what is that tikkun. But there are two levels of tikkun. One is national, worldly, for Klal Yisrael and the world. And the other one is personal. Each person has his own area of tikkun. And therefore, what you have to do is decide it based on your neshama, your gula, whatever, and so on. It is decided what your tikkun is, and therefore your life circumstances have to reflect that area of tikkun. In a very broad sense, that's what it does. So therefore, we are involved in tikkun on a personal level, each one himself, because each one is designated a specific area in the Bria that you have to bring a tikkun, which means you have to be mayor, you have to bring the ha'or of the spheres. And also on a national level, Klal Yisrael also has, as a unit, also has the totality of the Bria that they have to do. So there are really two areas of Torah. In that, so therefore, that's the first area, which is the chokhmas of Torah, and it's all about those 7 things. Actually, there was one more, and that is the internal mechanism. How does the Rebbeinu relate to the Bria? And that's the parsha called Soid, which is basically Kabbalah. All of these areas are in Torah. But that's one dimension of Torah. Torah, however, has a second dimension, which is astonishing. And the Ramchal dwells on this. And once we understand that, we now begin to understand what the incredible uniqueness of Torah is. What the Ramchal did is very interesting, and we'll understand why. He took the Or of Keser, which is the highest sphera, and there are 10. Okay, Keser is a sphera which is the highest one of all, and you can get a feel of the spheres by taking a look at the spheres that you receive every night after Marav, and so on. So you have Keser, which is the highest sphera, which is the most powerful of all the Ha'oras, and he tied that to limud Torah. That's what he did, which is astounding. That means that when you learn Torah, you're not just bringing down a ha'orah of any sphera. No. You're bringing down the or of the greatest of all the spheres, the most powerful of all. With that, we begin to understand its uniqueness, because it is the only thing that can touch that place and release the or of that sphera. There is no other mitzvah. In fact, it says, we know, we daven in the morning, it says, Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam. What is Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam? What that means is that you put Torah on one side of the scale, and you put all the other 612 commandments on the other side. Torah will outweigh them all combined. Why? Because Keser, why is it so powerful? Because it's an all-inclusive, all the other 9 spheres are in it. You see. And therefore, Keser is a totality of or. Therefore, it's Keneged Kula. All of them are included in that sphere. So therefore, if Torah can bring down Kesser, that Ha'orah of Kesser, what that means is that it is the most powerful of all, and that's why Talmud Torah Keneged Kula. This is what the Ramchal says, which is an astonishing concept. There is no other way to access the Ha'orah of that sphere. You need to learn Torah. When you do it, you will bring down an or which we cannot have. We can have no hasaga of what that is. This is the uniqueness and the specialty of what Torah does. Why is that? Why does Torah do that? Okay, we understand that the Rebbe Shem tied limud Torah to bring down the greatest of the or. We understand that. But why? Because you have to understand what Torah really is. What Torah really is, it's a document that has the total description of everything the Rebbe Shem ever did, I should say, ever created. That's what Torah is. It is a document of totality. That means that, and that's what the Medrash says, Istaku b'Yaraisa Bora Alma. What does that mean? That means Torah is a document that describes everything the Rebbe Shem ever created. That's what Torah is. And therefore, he created the Torah first, looked at it, and from that he created everything else, because Torah describes everything that exists. You may ask, well, where is that in the Torah? And the answer is that there are many ways of reading the Torah. You can read it what's called forwards, Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Dalet. That's where we read it. You can read it backwards. Okay? Tashrak, Tov, Shin, you can almost read it backwards and see which way that goes. Or you can read its reciprocals, Atbash. You take an Aleph and you switch it for its Tov. It's Beis, you switch to Shin. That means the letters of the opposite side of the alphabet are interchanged. You can read it that way. You could change its punctuation. You take its sentence period and you move it, and it's another concept, and so on. And then there's Nodorikans. There's Gematrias. If you add up the totality of all the way the Torah can be nidreshes, you will get the totality of everything. Literally. And of course you have the concept of Rosh Tevis, codes and so on. It's all there. It's all in the Torah. Therefore, Torah is what? Is a document of totality. That's why basically, if an ois is missing, if a letter is missing, right, then that Torah is possible. Why? Because if one letter is missing, therefore something about reality is not in it, because the letter is missing. Therefore, if some aspect of reality is not in it, it can't be Torah. That's the concept of what Torah really is. Therefore, what the Rebbe Shem did is he took the Torah, which is a description of everything, and he connected it to the or, which is everything, because everything is included in that or. And therefore, one can bring down the ha'orah of another. That's what the Rebbe Shem did. That's why it says, Torah Hashem Tamimo. It's complete. The concept of completion means that the Torah is a document that has everything in it. Somebody once asked, went over to the Vilna Goyen, which is interesting, and he asked them, you say not only is everything in the Torah, everything is merumas in the first word, gracious. So where's the concept of pidyon aben? He asked the Vilna Goyen. Right? Everything is gracious, so he picked out one. Pidyon aben. He asked that to the Gro. So the Vilna Goyen, probably without batting an eyelash, he said, well, just take a look at the word gracious. Beis, Reish, Aleph, Shin Yotov. You read it, Ben Rishon, Acha Shloishim Yoim, Tifte. That is the word gracious. Gracious is nothing more than a word of Rosh Tevis or Nodorikim of Pidyon Aben. Astounding. And I once saw a sefer that has 1,000 Rosh Tevis of the word gracious. I forgot what the name was, so I can't even get it anymore. But whatever it was just an incredible sefer to look at. In any case, and that's just the first word. Torah in its totality contains everything. Therefore, Torah in that sense is united with the or of which it brings down, which the or of totality. Makes perfect sense when you think about that. And that's what Torah Hashem Tamimo really is. That the Torah is complete. What does that mean? It has everything in it. As they say, hafoich bo v'hafoich bo shekula bo. Turn it over this way, turn it over that way, everything is in it. Our problem is we can't read it other ways. We can only read it forward. We can't read it backwards or sideways or up and down and so on. We have no hasog of that. That will be only later in Yemosei Mashiach. But in any case, this is what the Torah really is. But there's truth is, there's something more profound. I'm saying that what Torah is what? It is tied to the greatest of the Oros, which is Kesser, okay? And therefore, it can bring down that, and that itself is the most powerful of all the spheres. And that ultimately can actually create an Olam Haba. This is what we see. However, there's something more profound about this. What is it? Torah is not merely a document that is connected to the Or of Kesser. No. Torah is Kesser. Difference. It's not that it's connected to Kesser, which is how we can think. No. The manifestation of Kesser in this world is Torah. So what we're really looking at is what's called in English an identicality. They're identical. That the Or of Kesser is the Torah. But what the Ramchal did is very interesting. He took the Or of Kesser and he converted it in this world into what? Into four things. And it's referred to as Tanto. Tanto is what? Tanto, the Tes is Taimim, the top. Nun is Nekudas. Tan, To, you have the Tov, is the Tagin, and the Aleph is Oisis. There you are. Taimim, Nekudas, Tagin, and Oisis. Those aspects of a letter, those four things that go into one letter, it's Tam, it's Nekuda, it's Tag, and it's Ois. That really is the manifestation of a specific Or that is part of Kesser. So therefore, the reason why Torah can bring down that Or is because it is that Or. It is a manifestation or expression of that Or in physical terms. That's really what it is. If we understand that, we understand something else, which is interesting. The Malachim, they had a debate with Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu went up to get the Torah. And the Malachim said, why should we give it to you? Why should Moshe give it to you? He should give it to us. That's what he should do. So the question is, so Moshe Rabbeinu answered them. Does it say, keep it over aim by you? Do you have fathers and mothers? And so on? So why would he give it to you? Obviously, you cannot fulfill the mitzvahs of Torah. So how in the world can it go to you? So the question we have to ask is, what's the Havamid of Malachim? What is their idea that can even think this way? And the answer is, what we now understand is what? Is that they wanted to learn the Torah at the level of the spheres, without having an expression into Oisis and Tagin, Taimim and Nekudas. That's why. Because Torah can be understood at a different level. It's what's called its origin. And this is what they wanted to do. That's what they wanted. So the question is, we understand the Havamid of the Malachim, because they also can have Torah in its origin. So the question is, what did Moshe Rabbeinu answer them? So what he answered them was very interesting. He said, you got a good point. Maybe. But there's something wrong with your request. You know what that is? Here's the problem. And he brings down keep it over aim. One of the ideas, right? What is keep it over aim? It assumes that you're a child. And therefore, there's a mitzvah of keep it over aim. Right? What's the concept of a child? A child embodies the concept of growth. You start off at a certain level, and you grow. Right? And therefore, the ones who will ensure your growth are your parents. Therefore, HaKaras HaToiv, keep it over aim. But the essential idea of keep it over aim only exists because you got to come into this world as an infant. Right? That presupposes growth. So Moshe Rabbeinu says, wait a minute. Okay? The Moshe doesn't want to give you a hasag of Torah because you guys don't grow. Not you guys, but you Malachim don't grow. Right? Malachim don't grow. They're static. They stand. Only an Adam, only Klal Yisrael grows because we do the tikkun. So Moshe Rabbeinu says the fact that the Moshe gave us mitzvahs is because he wants Torah, or the or to come down in pieces or parts, growth. You can't do that. You cannot create a gilui of Torah more and more. And clearly, the fact that there is a concept called kibbud over aim puts you outside the realm of Nesinas HaTorah. In any case, that's what Moshe Rabbeinu said. But what it is, his idea is predicated on the fact that there's a concept of growth. And the Moshe wants to grow in Torah. Why? Because he wants to bring out the ha'orah of Keser in pieces. And that is our job, to build Olam Haba. In any case, why is Keser so great? Because as I said, each Olam reflects a different hasog of the Rebbeinu Shalom. Because in the end, that's really what it's all about. This world is nothing more than a hallway to get to understand who the Rebbeinu Shalom is. Once you have that understanding, that hasaga will create in you an experience. It will change you radically. That's what happens. Therefore, the Keser, or that particular sphere, has a presence of the Rebbeinu Shalom that mirrors something above it. What is that? Ein Sof. What the Keser does is it mirrors some aspect or resemblance of the Rebbeinu Shalom before he even created the Bria, and that is Ein Sof, an infinite being. I don't want to get too much into that because it's a whole different shir. But the main idea is that's why Keser is so great. It mirrors the hasaga, the presence of the Rebbeinu Shalom, the greatest giloi or the hasaga that any nivra can have. And therefore, it has the greatest ore of all. And that ore is the totality. Because what we really live in a world is a world that has pirud. The essence of Olam Hazeh is pirud, separation, distinction. But in the world of Keser, there is no distinction. It's all an ultimate yichud, which we do not understand. How everything is really one. And therefore, Torah is really the limud of that the Rebbeinu is Einay Govadoi. In fact, now you understand by Matan Torah. So it says, you have been shown that you may know. Ki Hashem Elokim, that the Rebbeinu is the Lord, the Master, Einay Govadoi. So Rashi says over there that what the Rebbeinu did is he opened up the heavens and he revealed to them Yichud Shel Olam. He showed them that he's Yichud Shel Olam. Now, we would think, okay, he showed them that he's Yichud Shel Olam, that's number one. But the second thing is that what? Is that now they're the Taryag. But that's not what Rashi means. What Rashi means is a tremendous premise. What the Rebbeinu showed them is the Torah. That the Torah is nothing more than Yichud Shel Olam. That's what it is. It's not that there's a Yichud Shel Olam and a Torah. The bottom of Torah is a premise that we can't be massing. It is an expression in Olam Hazeh with this period, really ultimately of the true reality called Yichud Shel Olam, Einay Govadoi. That is the Torah, except in the world of Geshem, the Torah is nothing more than period. That's a very important concept to understand. In any case, this is what Torah does. Every time you learn, you tap into that incredible ore. And there's no other way to tap into that. What determines the amount of Torah that comes down? That is a question. It's valid. Is there any way to determine the quantity that comes down? And the answer is yes. There are 7 variables that determine how much of Keser you bring down. And it's worthwhile to know them. Because we all learn Torah, we might as well bring down as much as we can. So the question is, what determines the amount of ore that we tap into? Well, the first thing is called asek, involvement. We make a bracha, right? In the morning. Lasek b'divrei Torah. To be involved, to be asek in Torah. Why do we make a bracha of lasek b'divrei Torah? Why don't we say limud Torah? What is this lasek business? And the answer is that the involvement of Torah in different ways is what taps into that ore. So if you're asik in Torah, for instance, let's assume you're learning a Tosfos and it's very hard. So you step back for a minute and you relax for a minute, just to grab hold of your mind, just to give it a rest. You're still involved in limud Torah. You still are bringing down the or of Kesser. Because you are involved, you are oisik in Torah. Even if for that minute you're just relaxing for a minute, trying to sort of like recharge the batteries. So therefore, asik itself is a way of bringing down the or of Torah. What else is this? Then the Ramchal says something amazing. Re'iyah. If you look at the oasis of the Torah, when they do Hagbah, that is a tikkun of Torah. Yes, the Re'iyah itself, looking at the oasis itself, brings down that or. That's how great the Torah is, that when you look at it during Hagbah, or when you get an Aliyah, and you look at the Torah, that or is coming into you. That is one of the ways of bringing down that or. That's a second way. A third way is if you read it. If you read Torah and you do not understand what you are reading, that itself will bring down that or. That's right. The Kriya itself, without any Havana, has enough power to bring down that or. That is the third way of bringing down or. There's a fourth way. Not just reading it, or looking at it, or being oisik in it, right? It's also Havana, to understand Torah. And that has a lot of dimensions to it. Very interesting. To understand Torah brings down an incredible amount of that or. More than reading, more than looking, and so on. Just to understand, what does this mean? Not just what does it say, or how do I read it, but what does it mean? So the Havana itself brings down an enormous amount of awe. But that Havana is based on certain ideas. There are many levels of Havana. There's a Havana of what? Of what is the halacha. That's called analysis, to analyze. Then there's the Havana of what's called synthesis. Well, let me connect this to all the other halachas. Let me put it together in a beautiful binyan. That's a second Havana. Then there's a Havana of depth. Why is this halacha so? That's another type of Havana. Then there's the Havana of Sui. Well, I understand what the halacha is and why, but what does this have to do with the pneumius of the Bria? There's all different levels of Havana. And each level that you achieve brings in a greater amount of the awe. So somebody understands Gemara at a certain level, let's say, or Torah, is in a doima, the Ramchal says, to somebody who understands Torah at a deeper level. The deeper you go, the greater the amount of awe that you bring down. So this is, in many ways, critically very, very important to determine the amount of awe. Another determinant of the or is the area. Yes, if you learn Torah, you bring down a greater or than you learn the Nevi'im and Ksubim. Nach. If you learn Torah, then the areas of Torah, as I said, itself has different amount of eris. Ramchal says something interesting, that the area of Torah that brings down the greatest or of all is called Yedias Elokus, the knowledge of God, to know the Rebbeinu Shalom. Therefore he says, which is interesting, in the Sefer Derech Chochmah, that learning either Hashkafa or Kabbalah is the greatest awe you can bring down. Why? Because that is a direct understanding of who the Rebbeinu Shalom is. Not just what he commanded you, the mitzvahs, but to know who he is, as it says, Yodata Hayoim, and you'll know this day, V'hashivoyse Elovarecha, Ki Hashem Elokim B'Shemaim Mimah V'Onos Mitachas Einoi. Therefore, Ramchal says that the greater the hasog of who he is, the greater is the awe you bring down, which makes sense. Because as I said, Kesser is really, that awe is the greatest giloy of the Ein Sof. And that's really what it is. Therefore, on Ramchal, the limud of either Hashkafa and certain Kabbalah, the greater, will give you the greatest amount of awe that you can imagine. And then, besides that, there are other areas. But those are the greatest areas that the Ramchal says. So the area of Torah that you do. The next one is the amount. Well, how much you're going to learn? It's the amount of Torah. Somebody learns 1 hour, he's going to bring down a certain amount of ore, right? And then somebody learns 5 hours, bringing down a whole different a whole different amount of ore. So therefore, the amount that you learn, or rather, the amount you learn depends, that creates a certain amount of ore. So the amount of ore that comes down is the amount of ore, or rather Torah, that you learn. A masmid will bring down much greater ore than somebody who's not a masmid. The main thing to remember is that in all aspects of Torah, Tanakh, and by the way, Gemara, Ramchal says that if you read Gemara, you don't bring down anything. You must understand Gemara. Gemara needs Havana, whereas Torah does not need Havana. So that's the difference between Torah Shabbat and Torah Shabbat Peh. So therefore, the amount you learn brings down a certain amount of ore. The more learning, the greater the ore. And the last one, which is interesting, it would seem to be that it has nothing to do with Torah. What is the last one? Amelus, effort. Schwitz, effort. Serious nefesh. Ramchal says that effort is an incredible determinant of how much ore you bring down. And that's why it says, Lefum tsaro agro. It says that in the Gemara. Lefum tsaro, according to the tsar, which means according to the effort, and that's painful. According to the Mesiras Nefesh, what you have to give up to learn, that will determine the amount of ore. The question is why? I can understand Torah itself, because that's a direct understanding of the tzivur of the Ratzon HaBorei. Or it's a direct understanding of the Rosh Hashanah. What does effort have to do with this? And the answer to that is, what is the godless of Amelus altogether? Well, Amelus does several things. One, the more you're humble, the greater value of Torah you exhibit. The greater amount of Torah you display. Because you're giving up much more, you're working and schwitzing. So therefore, clearly, the Torah that you are moiseh nefesh, or effort, has to be much greater in your eyes. And if that's the case, midah keneged midah. If the Torah is great in your eyes, therefore, the ore you bring down will be greater. But there's another concept. What is that concept? Because the essence of what the Rosh did is and this is the concept of the Sultan, what the Rosh did is he pitted you against him. That was the contest, or the story of Adam Rishon. What does that mean? Because we don't want to really do the Ratzon HaBorei. Why? We want to feel like somebody. We want to do what we want to do. We want to express our will. And therefore, man is in constant battle with the Rosh, whose will dominates. And Adam Rishon had that problem in the beginning. Because the Nochash said to V'yisim Kelokim, and Adam says, that's what I want. The battle of what's called the enhancement of self is the battle that the Rosh placed us in. So therefore, the greatest amount of tikkun, or the greatest expression that you can do, is to deny self. And therefore, when you have to schwitz to do something, you don't want to schwitz. You don't want to work for this. So therefore, when you do it, it's a denial that you want to do what you want to do. Instead, you mavatal what you want to do. You mavatal it for the Rebbeinu Shalom's Ratzon, and therefore it's a denial of self. A denial of self will bring midah keneged midah, the presence of the Rebbeinu Shalom, eined mavaday. Because the denial of self ultimately declares eined mavaday. Not yeshud mavaday, besides him there's also me. No, eined mavaday. And I believe it so much that I will be moiseh nefesh. I will create effort even though it's against what I really want to do. And that is the greatest expression, edus, testimony of eined mavaday. That's why Amelus is so important. And that's why the Fumtsara Agra, that Amelus in the end is really what does it, in that sense. So therefore, the greater the Amelus, the greater is the amount of ore of the greatest of all the spheres. Very important concept. In fact, the Vilna Gaon says something very interesting. When you get to Shemayim, what do? So the Vilna Gaon says, Ein moinen dabin, they don't count pages. Elishos, hours. That's what they count. They don't count how much you finish, because it says, Lo yolecha ligmor. It's not your job to finish it. Therefore, they don't count pages. What they count is hours. Hours is amelus. How many hours do you sit and learn something that you really had to put in all the effort to deny self and not to do something else that you would love to do? except you sat and learned Torah because that's the Ratzon HaBorei. So therefore they count hours, because hours is a reflection of Amelis, not pages. Because a guy who has a great head can learn faster than another guy. So they're not going to count that, because when a person has a great head, it's a gift of the Rebbeinu Shalom. That's all it is. It's not him. But what he contributes, and which is truly his, is the amount of schwitz. How much effort are you going to do? That's his contribution. So therefore, Amelis is critical to bring down the most amount of ore. So when a person does that, and he brings down this ore, what does he do? He brings down, because this ha'ora is a ha'ora of yichud, which we will experience in Olam Haba. He brings a tremendous shleimus of the neshama and also the bria. That's right, he does both. When you learn Torah, you're not only bringing a tikkun, or you're not only bringing down the ore, that sphera, into what? Into yourself. And therefore, ultimately, you change yourself, and you'll be able to be masik to the Rebbeinu Shalom, but you are also being masakin the entire bria itself. So you can ask me, well, why? And there are many reasons. But one of the most central ideas is this. What did I say? That Torah is a totality. Everything the Rebbeinu Shalom ever did is in the Torah. Obviously, if he created the bria, that's also in the Torah. The bria is in the Torah. So if you learn Torah and you bring down the ha'ora of Keser, you bring it down to everything in the bria. So when you learn the location of where that thing is marumas, is indicated, guess what? You bring a ha'ora to that place, and that thing that the Torah describes, what the Rebbeinu Shalom created. You see? So by learning the Torah, which is the totality of everything, you are masakin everything. You see? So therefore, what Torah does, it will bring a shleimus, which is a perfection, in the sense that you will experience the Rebbeinu Shalom not only to yourself personally, but you will also bring it down to the entire bria. That's why it's so important to learn Kol Torah Kula. And we see that from Chazal. Chazal say, Li'olam yishalash odam yomav. A person should always divide his days into thirds. Shlish b'mikra, 1/3 Mikra, Tanakh, 1/3 Mishnah, and 1/3 Gemara. Why? Because it takes the totality of all Torah to reach the totality of the entire sphere of Keser. And that's why a siyum is so gewaldig. Because when a person is Messiah, Shas, especially, and Tosfos says that you can mekayim that Maimon Chazal by learning Gemara and Shas, because Bavli has everything in it. It has Mikra, Mishnah, and it has Gemara. So when you learn the entire Shas, what have you done? You have learned Kol Torah Kula, which means that you have accessed and brought down the total ore of Keser that's given to you to Masakim. You have any idea what that means? It's half a day. To bring down the totality of Keser, which is the greatest ha'ora of Yichud, and you did it. It's awesome. That's why a siyum has such incredible chashivas, because of what it does. Therefore, this is what the Torah does. It creates a shleimus in the Adam, it creates a shleimus in the Bria, and it's important to try to finish as much as possible, because then you will have done the complete avodah, basically, and so on. This, therefore, is the concept of what Torah is. Very important idea. You now see that Torah, why it's connected kulam, because it can tap into, and it is identical to, the greatest ha'or of all, the greatest force in the universe, in creation, which is that power called Keser. And therefore, there is nothing that can duplicate it. Therefore, when you learn Torah, it weighs against all the other mitzvahs of the Torah. This is the concept of Torah. But there's something else I wanted to mention. Torah today, I had mentioned that Amelus is critical. But that's very good, and that's true. But the truth is, Amelus today does something more. It does something else. And what I want to do is what's called bring you up to speed. Today, the problem that we had is that by Matan Torah, the Jews were chote by the Chet Egel. As a result of the Chet Egel, which they were chote, what they did is they took the Torah that was given then, and that Torah really was an or of Kesser. How do you know? If you think about it, what does it say? It says that because when the Yidden said Nasa v'nishma, they received two what? Two ksurim, two crowns. That sounds familiar, doesn't it? Those are the crowns which is Kesser. But the interesting thing about it is that they received the Torah as the Or Mashiach, as the Or HaGonos. Because they were zoichet to that because of the Shib Mitzrayim. Therefore, they received the Or of Mashiach. They received the Torah in the form of the Yemois HaMashiach, what's called the Messianic light. That's what they got, which is awesome. We have no concept of that. The problem is that they did the Chet Egel, so they restored the Torah of the Mashiach, and they cast it out, and it went into what's called Klippa, which means that it became concealed. The real Torah is concealed behind a wall of Tumah. This is the problem that we've had. The Chidor says in the Pnei David that the tafkid of learning today is what? Is to break that wall, that choyma. If you break that choyma, then the Torah instantly comes out as that tremendous pnimius. This is what happens if you learn the Torah, if you break the choyma. The question is, how do you break it? How do you break a wall of tumah that surrounds the Torah because of the Chet Egel? And the answer is Amelis. Why? Because what is the concept of a Yetzer Hara? I mentioned before, the central function of a Yetzer Hara is to deceive you. What is the deception that he wants to do? He wants you to think that you're somebody. He wants you to have a sense of self, where you will say, Einod Mavadoi? There's no Einod Mavadoi. It's Eishod Mavadoi. There's Rabbi Hashem, there's me. That's his major matorah, to deceive you. So therefore, what must you do? Reverse. Einod Mavadoi. This is what you have to do. So when you're Omer B'Torah, what are you really doing? You're denying Yeshod Mavadoi, and you're declaring Einod Mavadoi, which is exactly what you should be doing. Therefore, it's a Keneged Midah. Your Amelis declares Einod Mavadoi because I'm schwitzing to learn Torah, right? And the Tumah says, or the Klippa says, Yeshod Mavadoi. There's also you. So therefore, you're able to break through the Amelis, the Chumah, the Tumah, or the Klippa of the Torah itself. And that emerges. The Ari says something very interesting. He says, what's the manifestation of the Chumah when you learn? The Kasha. If you had the Or Mashiach, you would have no Kashas at all. It would instantly fly into your head. But when you have a Kasha, it's because there's a Chumah there. And the way to break it is you gotta knock your head out to understand what in the world is the answer to this. So therefore, a Kasha is a manifestation of that Chumah. Today, where are we at, really? I will tell you something which is my own thought, which is an application of what I've just told you. Here's the problem. The problem is this. As you get closer to the Yemois HaMashiach, which we are very close to, everybody can see that, what's happening in the world and so on. We're very close. The problem is that the Gezer of the end is what's called Choshech. We have in the Gemara that Chazal said, Yesiv lo ichminei, in Sanhedrin, Chelek. Many Chazal said, Rabbi Yochanan, Ilfa, and so on, let him come, but I don't want to be there. What does that mean? Let him come, I don't want to be there. He says, I don't want to be there in Yemois HaMashiach. Or, excuse me, in Ikvus of the Mashiach. Why? Because it's terrible. The question is, what were they so frightened about? Was it the Chevle Leda? What is that? Is it the persecutions of the Jews that bothered him so much? No. That's not what bothers a tzaddik. What bothers a tzaddik isn't suffering. What bothers a tzaddik is mere or. There's no ruchnias. It's all concealed. You look around, the world is unbelievable tumah. Look how many Yidden are gone. Millions of Jews have no shaychus to Torah. Therefore, what they said, we don't want to live in a world that has mere or. We cannot be served with the choshech. We cannot be served with the hester. That's what bothers a tzaddik, which makes a lot of sense. Because their whole life is striving for ha'ora, not for hester. This is what they said. Therefore, the gzer of the end if the Jews are masakin the Bria, without explaining, through what's called chatoim or yisurin, and I mentioned that's the third device, then the Mashiach will come on Yidei Teva, Mashiach ben Yosef. If they are masakin the Bria through mitzvahs, then the Mashiach ben Yosef will come through nisim, miracles. What are we doing? Obviously, it's not going to happen miraculously unless all the Jews do tshuva, but if not, then the Mashiach ben Yosef, which is the one who brings in the aura of the Mashiach, he's going to come through Teva. But the problem is this, if the tikkun of the Bria happens through Yisurin, and not through mitzvahs and enough tshuva, then the decree of the end is there has to be incredible choshech of darkness. In fact, the first pasuk in Bereshis, the Ruach Elokim, the second pasuk, Ruach Elokim merachefes al pnei hamoyim. The Ruach Elokim, and the spirit of the Rosham merachefes hovers over the face of the deep. So the Baal HaTurim says the Ruach Elokim merachefes is the gematria Zuhi Ruchoi Shel Melech HaMoshiach. That Ruach Elokim that is merachefes is the Nishmas Mashiach. But what is it hovering over? Choshech. That's what it's hovering in. So therefore the gzeir of the end, depending if the tikkun is done to Yisurin or Chatoim, which leads to Yisurin, is that there has to be incredible hester, choshech. But if that's the case, there's no more amelus. So then what's going to break the tumah? Bishlom in the earlier generations, you had amelus, because there was an enormous amount of Talmidei Chachamim. They all learned Torah. So therefore, they had amelus. They had amelus, then you break the choyma, which was placed as a result of the chet of Klal Yisrael by the chet oegel. But if the gzeir at the end is that there's choshech, there's no Torah, it's hester, and therefore there's no amelus. So then what do? This is a central problem of the end. How do we break the rest of the choyma, the tumah, klipa, if there's no Torah and there's no amelus, basically? This is the question. And I believe the Rosham, of course, came up with an incredible solution. You have to ask yourself a question. There's an Indian called Daf Yomi. Why is it Daf Yomi? You mean Chazal never thought of Daf Yomi for 2,000 years, right? You needed the chalk of a Rebbe and Rabbi Moshe and Meir Shapiro to think about the concept of a daf a day? I don't think so. So why did Chazal say it? Because the answer to that is you didn't need it. Because the Ikasach was Amelus B'Torah, he had all the Torah and he had Amelus. The problem is you come to the end, right? And all of a sudden there's an enormous amount of Hester. And there's no Amelus. So what do? So what the Rosham did is very interesting. He said, until now, the Amelus was what? In understanding the Torah. Now the Amelus is getting up 5 o'clock in the morning to sit down by a shir and just barely keeping your eyes open. That's the Amelus. It's not that it's the Amelus of knowing Torah. Because who remembers the Torah of Daf Yomi, basically? Unfortunately, Daf Yomi is the only way a person can say that I forgot the whole Shas. Clearly, Chazal never wanted originally a Daf Yomi. But the idea is now that you need Amelus of something. So what the Rabbi Shem did is he switched the Amelus of learning Torah, which Yidden still do, the whole Lakewood Amelus and so on, and Yeshiva Light and so on. But the Amelus of Klal Yisrael is missing. So what Daf Yomi does, it gives a guy Amelus to sit and learn Shas for 7.5 years, to get up in the morning, to deny yourself every simcha at night because you're going to miss the daf. That's unbelievable Amelus. That is going to finish off the tikkun. That's my personal observation of why this phenomenon exists today. And therefore, we have a tremendous resurgence in the whole concept of learning Torah. So, whether it be through the limud Torah, which brings down this incredible ore, the greatest of all the oros, or it's the amelus of today, which destroys the shell. Ultimately speaking, there clearly will be a time when the Mashiach comes very quickly, and as a result of that, of course, we will begin to be masik that concept of Kessin. And you see it in Chazal, because it says in Chazal, Tzaddikim, what happens in Olam Haba? Tzaddikim yoshvim, Tzaddikim sit, right? The Atoraseyim b'rosheim, and the crown is on their head. What crown? Kesser. V'nenim zera shchina. You see, that's the payoff. is the crown on their heads, is the Kesser that they have mitzad, the limud Torah, which brought down the whole concept of Kesser, the greatest of all the spheres. Okay, let's hope that we're all going to be now on over Torah, because who's not going to want to bring this down? And it's the greatest way to tap into it. So therefore, it's very important that we take this to heart and really make a Zman Kavua to learn Torah, to be masmidim in Torah, and to learn as much as possible. And therefore, together with everybody, Messias Nefesh and Torah, we will have Mashiach hopefully in this year. Thank you. Amen.
Yerushalayim,